AC24 to get started now. The link is in the description below.
It's interesting because I saw in your face when we halfway through the conversation that you were talking about how beautiful love was, and I could see the emotion in your face when you were talking about how beautiful love is, and it's contrasting because at the start of the conversation, I would have thought that you thought marriage and love was just this like terrible idea. Obviously, there's a distinction between the two.
It's everything. No, it's everything. I think doing what I do for a living, I see that better than most people. Because we just keep putting these giant bets on the table. And we wouldn't do it if we didn't think the prize was worth it, you know? But see, I also believe, too, that we need to start looking at romantic relationships like chapters in a long book.
Soulmates.
I have to tell you, whoever created the term soulmate, I owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude because they really helped facilitate divorce as an industry. Because the idea that we have a soulmate and that's the one always creates the possibility that A, this person's perfect for us, for how could I be dissatisfied with them? If they're perfect for me, I must have picked the wrong one. And look, that one over there, that might be the perfect one. Why? Because I feel as great about them as I did about this one when I first met it, but I just don't remember that as much anymore. So the soulmate thing, it's great for business for me, but I think it's terrible for human beings. I think you probably could have a whole bunch of people that you could have had a very satisfying romantic relationship with. Again, not to keep comparing things to dogs, but because you love the dog you have now, does it mean you didn't really love the dog you had? It's ridiculous. It's like people who have children don't go I couldn't love anything more than this other child, so I'm not having any more children because, I couldn't possibly love. It's like, no, you have an infinite capacity for love. So if you have 2 children, you have 5 children, you love all the children that you have, So
it's chapters, you're saying
I think you should look at relationships as chapters. Just because a relationship ends in something other than death, right? It ends in divorce, it ends in a breakup, whatever it might be. It doesn't mean it wasn't successful. Did you leave it a better person than you came to it with? Did your partner? Did you learn from it? Did you learn what you want or don't want? Did you learn how you should behave or how you shouldn't behave? Did you learn something about how you want and need to be loved? Or how you fail in your attempts to convey love to someone else? Why not look at it as what was good for me in this chapter may not be the sustaining thing. Who you find attractive and what's compelling in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s can be different. You talk to a lot of 20-something-year-olds and say, what car do you want when you're in your Lambo? Want the Lambo. Great. You gonna put a car seat in a Lambo? If you get one car, and that's your car you're gonna drive for the rest of your life, okay? And you've never been 50 yet. So you don't know what you're gonna want when you're 50. Now, there's this idealized thing where everybody goes well, but you'll grow together, and then what you'll want, you'll grow together, and you'll change together. Okay, what are you basing that on? Is that a thing? Is that demonstrably true? Or is that just your hope? we hope we'll grow together, and we'll grow in complementary ways. Because why? Because of proximity? Because we're near each other, we're gonna grow in complementary ways? Is that naive? I think that might be naive. I don't have any proof of that.
But so many of the couples you see, it must be confused as to whether this relationship is actually broken or we're just not doing the work. I think that about a lot of my friends. They'll come to me and say, my relationship's struggling. And the first thing you try and figure out is whether this is something that is fixable or they're the wrong.
And what do you do in that equation? You compare, right?
Yeah.
You compare. And what do you compare to?
Something fake.
Bullshit. Yes, you compare to something fake. You compare it to the rom-com.
Yeah.
Which is basically porn for women. Yeah. Right? It's an idealized, stylized version. You saw Titanic. You know why they had that perfect romance? Because he died before he could screw it up. You think 10 years later she'd have been keep painting your French girls? No, she wouldn't have. She'd have been forget it. What are you doing? Get a job. There would have been issues in that relationship. So it only was perfect because it ended. It ended before they could screw it up. They end the movie. Like the old saying, I think it was Orson Welles who said, whether something's a comedy or a tragedy depends on when you end the story. So it's relationships. Like, you ever want to test that theory in the reverse? Go out with a couple that's unhappy with each other and then say to them, so tell me about how you met. All of a sudden they soften tremendously. And they start talking about who they were and who their partner was back in that day when it was all a possibility and they were choosing each other, And so I think there's tremendous value in, a great example. I always try to take non-relationship examples of relationship items. So one of my sons, when he was a teenager, was very critical of me as a father. He was very sort of dismissive of me as a father. We were talking about something and he sort of said well, Dad, you're not the perfect father. And I said, well, first of all, I don't know what a perfect father is. I was like, but what are you comparing me to? Your idea of a perfect father or a father you actually know and have seen? Because here's the thing. If you compare me to your perfect father in your imagination, I'm going to compare you to my perfect son in my imagination. And guess what? You suck. Because we all suck compared to the ideal of our imagination. And by the way, I said to him, learn this lesson now. Because if you compare a woman you're in a relationship with your imagined ideal of a woman, I promise you will be dissatisfied for the rest of your life in your relationship. And if she compares you to her idealized imagination of what the perfect man would be, she's going to be disappointed. We need to start comparing relationships to real relationships. But how are we going to do that if we're so deeply committed to lying to each other about how great our relationship is?
What's the quickest someone's gone from marriage to divorce that you've seen?
In terms of how long the relationship lasted?
Yeah.
48 hours.
You're joking.
No, 48 hours. But that's usually an annulment. Vegas, baby. Yeah, it happens sometimes. Where people just have immediate regret, or they married on a whim. I mean, there's a waiting period to get a firearm. There's a waiting period for almost anything. Marriage, you can go right now, get married, no problem. You just go to Justice of the Peace, pay $40 license fee, and you're married. That's it. Go to Vegas. You can get a guy dressed like Elvis will marry you for $50.
You said there's two main reasons why people get divorced. Infidelity, which we've talked about, and the other one we haven't talked about, which is money. I found this very interesting because I wouldn't imagine that money issues, and it's not the money issues we think about. It's not someone going broke.
Yeah, it's not that.
In your book, you talk about it being transparency.
Yeah. So I mean, money is power, right?
Okay.
Money has a lot to do with power. And I think there's a lot, it's misattributed to Oscar Wilde, but it's not something he would have said. There's the saying that everything in the world is about sex except sex, which is about power. And I think money is about power. Money is about control. Money is about opportunity, security. It's about a whole bunch of things, but it's not really about money. Money is just a currency, right, that we trade in. So I think money has a whole bunch of complicated stuff tied up in it. It's why we can't, in polite conversation, talk about what did you pay for that? How much do you make? It's considered sort of indelicate to do that because we've loaded it up with all kinds of emotional things about worth and relative worth. And so, it's not uncommon that people are dishonest with themselves and with each other about money. It's also not uncommon in a relationship that one of two dynamics emerges. Either one person has a tremendous amount of economic disparity, like leverage, or they have economic power that they can or can't leverage because of marriage. Or both people have somewhat equal bargaining positions, and then something changes. So, I see a tremendous number of divorces when husband and wife are both working and husband loses job. Big precipitator for divorce because men, it sends them spiraling into a depression that they've lost this job, that much of how they define themselves in sort of the traditional masculine gender role as that of a provider and a protector, and now I've failed at that through no fault of my own. They laid off the entire Northeast region. It's not my fault, but I no longer have a job, and then I have to go around and try to find one and redefine myself. And at the same time, my spouse has managed to keep their job. And I've seen a lot of women that when their spouse loses the job and they become the breadwinner, they find that very unappealing. That a man as the breadwinner was appealing, the man as economic equal is appealing, the man as I have to take care of him financially and provide for him, very uncomfortable. So I see it. When a man loses his job, I would love if they kept statistics on these kinds of things, but I can tell you in my practice, I've seen plenty of women lose their job. It has no impact on the marriage. Men lose their job in a heterosexual male-female marriage. It is disastrous consequences a great deal of the time. And I think that has a lot to do, again, it's not about money. It's about what the money symbolizes. It's about providing. It's about power, control, respect for the ability to go out there and like forge something from the world.
We said at the start of this conversation on this subject of money, sometimes you give legal advice and sometimes you give human advice. Yeah. As it relates to money, should I be telling my partner how much money I have? Because I imagine there's kind of two different there's a legal answer and a human answer.
Yeah, I mean, they're entitled to find out. So like part of, well, in a divorce, you have what's called mandatory discovery, which is that I have a right to review all of your financials in that process. So a tremendous amount of what I do all day and my team is we go through people's books. Like we go through the credit card slips. We go through all the economics to find out like where the money is, where it went, and that's how we find out what everybody spent on their girlfriend or boyfriend and all the credit card receipts, really. When someone says, I've got the receipts, like, no, I've got the receipts. Because I can subpoena them, meaning I can get them directly from the credit card company. I can get them directly from your employer, all your information about what you actually were given. And it's very hard to move money around without leaving a trace these days.
Well, a lot of people then must be trying to hide money, because I think I've heard of cases where there was one particular case of a footballer who apparently put everything in his mother's name. Did you see that meme?
Yes, and the problem with that is it's a great story, makes for a great story, but there are, in most jurisdictions, protections against that because it's what's called a transfer in contemplation of divorce. So it's essentially a form, it's like a fraudulent conveyance. It's designed to thwart someone's otherwise appropriate legal remedy. So if I know I'm being sued and that this person has a valid claim, so I sell my Lamborghini for $5 to my brother, the court can void that transaction.
But what if before there was any, suspicion of divorce or any issues, I put everything in my brother's or my mum's name?
You can do that. You're allowed to do it as long as it was not done. Yeah, I actually have seen that many times. I represent a lot of people in finance, and people in finance have a way of seeing money very differently. And I've seen people who, over a 20-year period, did things to take things out of the marital estate so that they were beyond the reach of the court.
Must be quite surprising when you're the other partner and you assume that your partner's super rich. You go for the divorce and you find out that they have nothing.
It's more common that people don't realize the debt structure that they're living under. Because a lot of people live under a tremendous debt structure. This happens in celebrity divorces a lot because a lot of it is the appearance of wealth, but it's not actual wealth. Mm-hmm. And so, they're highly leveraged. And so
what does that mean for the average person that doesn't know what leverage is?
It means credit card debt primarily. Credit card debt is a big thing. Or the cars, that you don't own the cars, you lease the cars, so they're actually owned by the bank. Even your home, if your home, 70, 80% of the equity in your home is the bank's mortgage, then you don't really have much. You don't own your home, the bank owns your home.
I think this is something people misunderstand, is that you get 50% of your partner's assets and you get 50% of their debts.
Of course. Well, you get the assets net of liabilities.
Yeah.
And most people, their net worth is what do you own net of liabilities. So there are a lot of people making a very, very good living, but they don't really have a lot of assets because what they've done is they've leveraged in a tremendous way. They have mortgages and they have debts accumulating. They have leased automobiles. They have, jewelry that they took a personal loan to guarantee, or that they purchased jewelry knowing that it will immediately depreciate in value. That the resale on it is much, much lower than the value that they just paid for it. So it's an illusion in many ways.
What about the opposite of that, where someone was in a relationship and their partner thought they were like broke or didn't have much money, and it turns out they're sat on a fortune?
Yeah, what's actually funnier is when someone really through no fault of even their own comes into some massive amount of money. Like I actually had a client who won the lottery. And so he went from like nothing. He had like a minimum wage kind of a job, and they lived a very modest life. And they were unhappily married, but they were like, well, we, can't really afford to live as a couple. We certainly can't afford to live apart. Like, it's bad enough we can't pay our electric bill. To have 2 electric bills, we'd have a hell of a time. And he won the lottery. He used to play the Powerball, and he won some insane amount. It was like, I don't know, $50 million. So then after taxes, it's like a 50% tax. It was like $25 million. And he was beyond thrilled until he got told, yeah, she gets half. She gets exactly half. And he was like, wait, why? I bought the ticket. I'm like, you are one person in the eyes of the law. If she won the lottery, you'd get half of it. You won the lottery, she gets half of it. That's how it works.
Did they stay together?
No, of course not. She was like, they're miserable with each other. I mean, at that point, he was suddenly very motivated that maybe we should stay together. But she was like, wait a minute, I get half of 25 million and I don't have to deal with you anymore? See ya. And that was it. That's why he was in my office. She had served him with divorce papers.
What about LGBT couples?
Yeah.
Does everything we've said apply in equal measure? Do they get divorced in the same?
Yeah.
Do they have the same issues we're talking about sex? Do they?
Yeah.
I
think a lot of the same things are true, meaning impermanence, soulmates, all of those kinds of issues. But I think because gay and lesbian couples were forced to the outskirts of the culture. They were the outsider for so long. So much of my life, even as a 51-year-old man, so much of my life, I saw my gay and lesbian friends ostracized, marginalized, and put on the periphery. That when you are put on the periphery, there is, as awful as that is, and as unfair as that is, and unjust as that is, and how much it should rightly offend our sensibility to see people marginalized and ostracized. It creates a certain freedom where it's like, okay, then we don't have to follow those rules. We can make our own rules.
Invention.
Yeah, we can do it how we want to do it. Because you know what? They think we stink. They think we're the worst. They think we're just, okay, so then we can do it how we want to do it. Because no matter what, they're not going to accept us. So we might as well do it the way that makes sense for us instead of, tradition is peer pressure from dead people. So if you're someone who's like, my parents have rejected me.
Sorry, tradition is
peer pressure exerted by dead people. I mean, it's really what it is. I'm not saying traditions aren't valuable,